Good afternoon and welcome back to Political Life, the Future of Food and Farming Summit in Paris. For those who are only tuning in now online, my name is Zosia Vanat. I am a reporter at Politico, and I will be moderating the last panel debate of today. There will be more coming tomorrow, of course. And the topic of this panel is about food insecurity, food poverty. These themes, these subjects have found their way back to the public debate, especially during the coronavirus pandemic last year. And today I would like to get into the details of this conversation with the three speakers who are joining me today online. I would like to welcome Ms. Isabel Caravallis, a member of the European Parliament, Tommaso Ferrando, research professor at the University of Antwerp, and Angela Frigo, Secretary General of the European Food Banks Federation. Some housekeeping rules, just to remember. We welcome you to ask questions for this panel. You can do that via our platform and Swapcard app and platform. And we also welcome you to use the hashtag POLITICO AgriFood to make this panel as interactive as possible. So let's start the discussion. I mean, I think when we talk about notions like food insecurity, food poverty, or hunger, we usually, the first thing that usually comes to our mind are the problems of the poorest countries in the global south, those countries which are torn by conflicts and wars. But I think that the pandemic has shown us that these problems are actually much closer to our European home that we might have expected before. So maybe before we start the actual policy debate on this issue, maybe it's worth to sort out the terminology around the problem. First I will ask Tommaso to tell us what is the difference between food insecurity, food poverty, and hunger, and which of these words actually describes the situation that we are facing now in Europe.
Good afternoon, Zosia, and good afternoon, everyone. And thanks a lot for inviting me and having me here today. You're right, we are not talking about the same thing when we talk about food insecurity or food poverty or hunger. And it's very important that we actually try to have a conversation on this difference, but also to enhance and to move forward in the conversation that we're having in Europe, and really bring back this point on the table of political debates all over the region. So food insecurity is normally what we hear about, and even if in the last years we are talking about food and nutrition insecurity, trying to add an element of the nutritional value and the possibility for people to access nutritional food. Normally, when we think about insecurity, we really focus on whether or not there is food on the table for the people, and whether or not they're going hungry, whether or not they actually have something to eat and put into their bodies, some energy, some calories, and some nutrition to move forward. When we think about food poverty, on the opposite, we're trying to get a broader and more systemic understanding of the living conditions of individuals and families. We're not only thinking about food, but really the context in which they are living, the daily routine, and focusing particularly with the socioeconomic conditions in which they're living. So it's not only about whether or not there is food, but whether or not there are resources in order to have access to the food, resources to cook that food, whether or not the money that they have at disposal are going to be used to pay for nutritional and healthy food, or they have to pay for other priorities like housing or health and sanitation, for example. So food poverty, differently from food insecurity, is a broader understanding of the living conditions of people. And if we move to food insecurity to food poverty, we realize that unfortunately the percentage of people living in conditions of food poverty struggling, not having enough resources, not having access to food because of also the way in which the cities are constructed and urban planning and etc. is way larger than what the numbers and the data on food insecurity will be talking about. So I really welcome the Politico's decision to talk about food poverty in the conversation that we're about to have.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Tomas. This gave us some clarity over, what we're even talking about. Angela, I mean, you work with people who are facing food insecurity and food poverty, especially during all the time, but it has been highlighted during the coronavirus pandemic. What do you think, which of these notions sort of apply the best to the people you work with every day? And what is the situation like? I mean, how is it changing right now? I mean, was it much worse last year during the pandemic? Can you see some sort of bounce back? And can we say that there are less people right now who are facing these challenges?
Yes, so first of all, thank you very much for your question and also for the possibility to participate today to this debate. So as European Food Banks Federation, we have a twofold mission, so to prevent food waste and to reduce food insecurity. Working together, our members, and we represent more than 300 food banks in 29 European countries, they recover food from the food supply chain, food which is perfectly edible and safe, but that for many different reasons cannot be sold to the normal client, to the normal customer. So could become food waste. And this food is recovered and redistributed to charities like soup kitchens or shelters for homeless people or communities that are helping people in need. So this is our daily mission. And in Europe, we started, the first food bank was established in 1984, so more than 35 years ago. So what we try to do is to, following the principle of subsidiarity, to support the charitable organizations. So providing food to them, they can focus their activity on social actions that can support and assist people in need. And what we have seen is that if we make a very quick comparison between 2019 and 2020, at European level in 2019, our network supported 9.5 million people in need, deprived people. And last year, there was an increase of 34.7%. So we, from 9.5 up to 12.8 million people in need. So it was really a huge increase. And what's the situation today? And it's an important day also because there is the UN Food System Summit, and we have released a report. And what we can record from our members, so from on the ground, is that there is still an increase, unfortunately, I would say. So what we are recording today is an increase of 40%. So it means that those who were affected by COVID last year, so people who lost their job or many families with children, are still struggling to put food on the table. So this is the situation today.
Sorry, so you mean the 40% increase in comparison to 2019, right?
Yes. Yeah, yes. That's right.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. So you've sort of described a bit on what you're facing in your everyday job. So I would like to direct a question to Isabel right now. You were like the representative of policymakers and this panel. What do you think on the European level and on the national level can be done, like in a tangible way, in a tangible manner, to improve the situation, which is clearly going in a very, very wrong direction?
Thank you very much for your question. And let me just mention something that I find very, very important to begin with. I was listening to the definitions of food security and food poverty. It is important, of course, to be aware of conceptual clarity because words do matter. But sometimes I feel that we tend to hide ourselves behind terms such as food insecurity to avoid talking about hunger. And the thing is, food insecurity or food poverty, regardless of the need to, of course, respect the conceptual differences, especially in the academic discourse, they both come down to the same human tragedy, which is hunger. And it is good that we also talk about this. The problem of hunger in Europe, as you said in the beginning, this was not, I think, sufficiently underlined because, as you said in the beginning, people still tend to see food insecurity or food poverty as something that happens elsewhere. And indeed, as we saw here already, food insecurity has increased greatly in Europe. But let me also add this because I find it very important. It did not increase in equal manner all around Europe. So if we look, for instance, at the FAO numbers on the prevalence of food insecurity at moderate or severe levels, what we see, it has been decreasing over the last 6 years, and suddenly it increased again in last year due to the pandemics. So now we have around 70 million. That is 12 million more people living in food insecurity in Europe. But if we look at Eastern countries, Eastern European countries, they alone suffered an increase of 13 million people living in food insecurity from 2019 to 20. So the 12 million people more in Europe is statistically explainable because there was a decrease of 1.7 million in North and Western European countries, even during the pandemics. And this is very important because it also reveals that inequalities exist among households within Europe and within the European Union. And of course, this has a direct impact in the future of the European Union, I think, because we have, as you said, we as politicians have to address this problem. I think that in general terms, food insecurity in Europe has been addressed, I would say, with significant steps over the years. That's why we saw this decrease, this important decrease over the last 6 years. For example, I would underline the EU Food Security Policy Framework of 2010, which already recognized it as a fundamental principle that food security strategies need to be a country-owned and country-specific, but at the same time, they need coherence all across Europe. But the current food insecurity situation shows, I think, the need for much more coherence in the international food-related governance systems, and looking also at the European case. And as well as between donors, when I look even at European level, the donors' interventions among different food security related EU policies. So we definitely need a more integrated governance policy that respects the various levels of decision, but also that may work in a coherent manner. And to finish this first question you have made to me, I think it is fundamental indeed that we do concretize the European pillar of social rights. Otherwise, I see this very, very difficult to address in a consistent manner the problem of food insecurity, and to address it in ways that will take into account the particularities of the populations within countries and among all European countries, as I tried to show with the previous numbers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. It's very interesting. I would like to maybe ask Tommaso and Angela, like, what do you think? Like, do you think the EU and national governments could do more, or do you think these actions that have been done so far are enough? Like, what would be your recommendations as people who work on this subject on daily basis? We can start with Tommaso.
Yes, thanks. Just to let me completely subscribe to what Isabel just mentioned. about the importance of not hiding behind terminology and really facing the hardship and the reality of life that for millions of people all over Europe, for billions of people all over the world is characterized by hunger, malnutrition, insecurity, and the impossibility of accessing food. I think what the difference is, and again links with what Isabel was saying, is that if we focus exclusively on insecurity, we may look at solutions that do not address the root causes, do not address the systemic reason why these people cannot have access to adequate, culturally appropriate, etc. food as it's their right. But if you think about food poverty, you really what you want to do is to think about the systemic causes for poverty and the systemic causes so that people cannot live in dignity and afford that food. And I think that is important to really, as Isabel was saying, thinking about the social component, the economic component of food insecurity and hunger that unfortunately goes even beyond hunger, because putting on the table something that is completely non-nutritional and actually detrimental for people's health is also equally problematic. In terms of whether or not Europe has been doing enough, just to go straight to your question, I think the numbers and what has been shown by Angela and Isabel is showing that unfortunately, no, we're not doing enough. Things are deteriorating quickly. And I think that the main reason why it is happening is that hunger, food poverty, and food insecurity are treated as exceptional. We saw also during the COVID pandemic, the response the European Union and the Commission tried to put forward were exceptional responses for an exceptional circumstance. While numbers have been saying that for decades, the situation of food insecurity and food poverty have characterized Europe. The second reason why I think we're not doing enough is that, as you mentioned before, we think that hunger and food insecurity do not belong to Europe. And we think that we're doing everything that we can do in terms of respecting people's rights. And again, I think this is crucial. So we think, and the European institutions and member states think that they're doing enough. But then when we look at the Farm to Fork strategy, when we look at the latest documents that we produced with regards to the future of food, human rights, and in particular the right to food, are dismissed, not present, or just touched upon as if they were one of the things that we have to consider. And that is happening both at the regional level with the European policies, but also at the international level with the documents that are being produced by the United Nations Food System Summit, for example. So if we don't take human rights seriously, if we don't take the right to food seriously, and if we don't put them at the center of the vision for the future of food, I don't think that there's going to be anything that can be done that is actually structural and systemic, that is going to be addressing those problems and those causes that are putting less and less food on the tables of someone and more food on the tables of someone else, because Isabel is completely right. We cannot dissociate food poverty and food insecurity, food inequality, and unequal distribution of resources. And I personally believe that it's only by taking human rights seriously and the commitment to human rights seriously that we can make a difference.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Angela?
Yes, well, if I can just comment on what Tommaso and Isabel said, I think that, well, I agree that we are not doing enough, but at least we are doing something. And I think that this is the right moment, because if I think at the European Union, so we have the European Pillar of Social Rights, and as Isabel said, it's the right moment to concretize this European Pillar of Social Rights. So at European level, we have the Fund for European Aid to the Most Deprived, and in the next programming period, there would be the REACT-EU initiative and also the European Social Fund Plus. So there are some tools that can be implemented at national level. So I think that we really need the support and the help of everyone, well, of politics at European level, national, but also regional level, of the private society, and as well as civil society organizations. And I think that this is the right time, not just for the European Pillar of Social Rights, but also, as it was mentioned, for the UN Food System Summit. So this is the right moment to move from a linear economy to a circular economy, and to have really a clear understanding that everyone is part of the food system. Those who are able to put the food on the table, but also those who today, unfortunately, are not able, so they need the support. So we really need a shift of paradigm, both in terms of from, let's say, a social perspective, but also from an economic perspective.
Perfect. That's really interesting. I mean, you all sort of agreed that there should be more action, there should be more policy making when it comes to those systemic problems of systemic challenges that cause hunger and food insecurity. So because we're slowly running out of time, maybe I would ask each of you if you could give me one idea of what could it be, like what concrete policy could it be that could help to fight this situation?
I would like to trying to answer to your question, also trying to make a connection to what Angela was saying, because I think it's very important that we realize that food insecurity has very different impacts on households. So when we look, for instance, at the pandemics, we saw that it brought food insecurity also to less obvious groups. For instance, students, university students. But from what I could see, for instance, in Portugal, and I'm sure this happened a bit around all European countries, the schools' canteens stayed open with extended support to provide meals to children and to their families and to the young, and also to university students. And my guess, as I said, is that this happened a bit everywhere at the local, at the national level, and so forth. But we lack data. And data is very important when it comes to design better policies. For instance, we have evidence, but we still need more and more readable data that seems to suggest that the elderly, the single-parented households, women in general terms, individuals with less schooling in low qualified or non-qualified jobs, they tend to be in contexts of households with lower incomes. We know this. Literature has lots of information on this. But we also know that in parallel, this raises significantly the probabilities of food insecurity. So these are populations that need quicker intervention, urgent intervention. And so when we talk about social protection policies, we have to bear in mind the specificities of the populations. I think you can't have general answers or, a suitable, an answer that is suitable to all. We have even in a single country, in a small country like Portugal, you have differences within the municipalities and among municipalities. So this implies data, this implies rigorous monitoring and evaluation on a continuous way, because this is also a dynamic reality. We should not forget that sometimes we think that, for instance, hunger or food poverty is something acute, an acute and temporary situation. But the thing is, its long-term effects on physical and mental health are absolutely devastating. And they are devastating in the life cycle of people and ultimately in all society. And at the end of the day, we all lose if we don't have a structured, integrated approaches to this phenomena. So again, my idea is that we must have an integrated policy approach to food insecurity. Let me just finish, because I still see many people, and sometimes even politicians at European level, which is weird, I know, but sometimes I see some of them saying that Europe does not have food insecurity, because they are, I think, considering mostly what happens in the food chain, in food production and food distribution. And indeed, we can't say we have a problem of that kind in Europe, fortunately. But the fact that we have food, available food, does not mean that every people, all individuals, all households will have the possibility to access this food. That's what we have been talking here this afternoon. This is what food insecurity and food poverty is about. Yeah.
Thank you, Isabel. I will just, because we're running out of time, I will just give the floor now to Tommaso and Angela, and I would have one more very quick question to all of you. So if we could keep it brief, that would be excellent.
I'll do my best. I would say two things. The first one is as a change of paradigm and a change of mentality. And I think that Isabel already mentioned a lot of that. Hunger, food insecurity, food poverty are not exceptional, and we cannot treat themselves as exceptional. So policymakers should not be thinking about that in terms of short-term solutions. And linking to that, and with the maximum respect for the work that food banks are doing, I think that the change of paradigm is also realizing that food security and access to food cannot be guaranteed by charities, by volunteers, by people who are putting their time for the benefit of other people. It should be an obligation of the states to provide food. And that's the concrete change, considering food and starting realizing that food is an essential service that everyone needs, just for the simple fact that without that, we cannot survive. And so that's the maximum change in paradigm that we have to push forward. And that can be then developed into specific policies. I think that public procurement, food canteens, the provision of food, not only to the most marginalized, but to children and to people who are in the phases of growth and etc., are direct intervention that are compatible with the human rights obligation that the European Union and the member states have subscribed to, and at the first step towards a change in the paradigm. And again, as Isabel was saying, there is not going to be any food policy that is successful without a social policy that is equally successful, and the two have to go together hand in hand, both in Europe and everywhere else where people are producing food and then is transported to Europe and is feeding Europe.
Perfect. And Angela?
Yes, well, I will be very quick. I would like just to add two words, and one is flexibility, and the other one is agility. So Isabel was mentioning, she was referring to a structured and integrated policy approach. I would like to add also these adjectives, so agile and also flexible. And we have seen that last year, maybe this is one of the lessons that we learned from COVID-19, is that agility and flexibility were extremely important in order to respond in a concrete and also quick way to the impact of the pandemic. So there was really an immediate response, and also because there was the collaboration of many stakeholders, well, from politics and policymakers, but also the private sector and the civil society.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We're running out of time a little bit, but I have a very interesting question here, so I hope no one is going to... Yeah, they're looking at me, but I will ask it anyway. So the question is about the EU Organic Day that we're celebrating today. It was announced today by the Commissioner Wojciechowski, which is one of the main objectives of the Farm to Fork strategy. And the question is, don't you think that if we go all in on this model, the poorest families in Europe could suffer more hunger because of the high cost of organic prices? Is this something, like with Farm to Fork, like better food, healthier food, it's generally more expensive. Do you think that it could hinder that it could make the situation even worse in implementing all these European policies? And really 2 sentences each, because we're going to have problems. Thank you, Isabel. Maybe you can start.
Okay. Wonderful. That's a very, very pertinent question. Indeed, it's important to realize that a paradigmatic shift implies innovative answers. So going organic is important, but there are also other agroecological practices and other ways to be considered, because we have to realize that we do need to feed an increasing number of people in Europe and around the world. So organic is very important, but we also have to realize the possibilities and the efforts that each country, each member state already has done in introducing organic farming. And some of them are very, very behind, others aren't. So this has to be looked in a balanced manner, and definitely this has to be combined with the capacity of consumers. So this cannot be for an elite choice. Sometimes people say this has to be affordable. This has to be accessible to all households. But as I said, I think not the secret, but the solution is that we must bet on various innovative answers, on science, on technology, on other agroecological answers. All combined, I think we can manage a better future, more sustainable, more resilient, and obviously, when I say sustainable, from an environmental perspective, but also from a social and economic perspective.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Isabel. Really, Tommaso and Angela, 2 sentences from each of you. I think it's important we know the answer, but also we really have to wrap it up. So thanks so much for keeping it short.
I'll go next.
Tommaso, if we could.
Yeah, thanks. I think we cannot save the planet with any intervention that is agroecological or organic, that is based on the practices of farmers, and accept that we are starving people. And at the same time, we cannot feed people and destroy the planet. So the 2 things have to go hand in hand. And that's why I think that intervention of the public authority and the intervention of governments in the European Union has to go both in support of a transition, a fast and quick transition towards agroecology and other sustainable agricultural practices, and in supporting families with forms of financial direct support to families and other interventions that make that food affordable and available and accessible.
Perfect. And Angela?
Yeah, well, let's say that as food banks, our objective is to provide food, which is good both in terms of quantity, but also quality. So what we are trying to do, and we know that we still have a lot to do, is to provide good food in terms of from a nutritional point of view, so also including organic food. And this is really one of the objectives for our in the future for our future work.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you so much. Sorry for keeping you a little bit too long, but I think the discussion has been really interesting and it was indeed worth it. Thank you so much to our panelists, and thanks to all of you who have joined us today on site and online. This was the last panel during today's session of our summit, and you're welcome to rejoin us tomorrow at 9 a.m. When my colleague Christian Oliver will be interviewing the United States Secretary of State Thomas Vilsack for the opening conversation of the day 2 of the summit. Stay tuned, join us tomorrow, and see you. Thank you very much.